Hi, Paul Harris, and welcome to the Maestro Online. So, you started out as a clarinettist, and now you are not just known as a clarinettist, you are known particularly for, I'll use this word, pedagogy, teaching, and teaching teachers, and your teaching methods of simultaneous learning, incorporating so many different aspects of music into the one lesson and the one course and the one person to develop the complete musician. Tell me about your journey from being a brilliant clarinetist to a brilliant educationalist.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Robin, for that very kind introduction. I don't know whether I was ever a brilliant clarinetist, but I've enjoyed playing the clarinet, and I did a concerto just a couple of weeks ago, actually. But I had some really good teachers, both musically and generally when I was at school. And for some reason, I loved this idea of teaching. I love this kind of process. Well before I even left school, I just got interested in this process of teaching, and went to the academy, did all my hard work, and interestingly, and I started teaching. My teacher got me a teaching job, maybe either in my first or second year at a school. It was all very formalized, and I absolutely loved it. And we had to do a big we had to create something, a thesis or something for the end of the academy course. And I wrote a clarinet tutor. Other people wrote essays. I wrote a clarinet tutor. And what I started to explore were ways of teaching, as you say, in a slightly more holistic way. And after I left the academy, I was doing a little bit of playing and a little bit of teaching, or quite a lot of teaching, and watching or seeing other teachers at work. And what I saw sometimes was not really what I thought was, well, to put it bluntly, very good teaching. And I got very interested in why, and watching these teachers at work, or at least the results of their teaching, and talking to people. And over a period of time, this idea of simultaneous learning grew. It didn't start with that title. It just kind of grew. And I became very interested in the process of teaching. And that's how it happened, really. It's just happened. I think teachers are the most important beings on this earth, without a doubt. We shape our pupils, we shape the future. And if we do it in a good way, theoretically, every generation should be slightly better than the last one. That's not actually the fact, is it? We don't. That's not what happens in life. But it should be. It should be. And I think if we begin to teach in the right way, then it could start happening. And that's really my reasons for spending all this time on trying to think about teaching and trying to cause other people to think about their teaching as well.
So your simultaneous learning is integrating a whole range of skills, isn't it? It's listening, it's improvisation, it's reading, it's playing, and it's all these skills and more all put together. What led you to this almost mind map that evolved?
That's right. Mind map, exactly. Now, I've actually got out this. I'm sure you've seen this. I don't know whether you can see this on the screen. This is
Yes.
my simultaneous learning musical map of the world, and that's everything there that kind of is our world in being musicians and music teachers. And it just seemed to me that a lot of music teaching, and look at how many there are. A lot of music lessons kind of really centered on just one of these things, or maybe two, and the one is technique. This is how you play your instrument. You press this key down, or you press this, or whatever it is. It was technique, and I thought, well, that's fine, but that's so restricted. And so I developed my musical map of the world, and what I say is, there it is that a lesson is a voyage of discovery around this world. A lesson is a voyage of discovery, and as we go through a lesson, we go from one area to another, exploring a little bit of this, making a connection with that, making a connection here, seeing how one of these things informs the other, and so builds up an understanding of what music is. As a music teacher, we kind of get that. whether we've seen that or not, we kind of get it instinctively. And occasionally we have a pupil who might instinctively get that, and they become our good pupils. But I believe that if we have this in our minds, and even, you know, on our desks as we're teaching and with our pupils seeing it, then they all become our good pupils, because they begin to get it, because it's there. We see it, we teach through this system, and they begin to get music in its general sense. And so there's more likelihood that they will continue with their music, enjoy it, carry on, not get stuck at a point. Because if you're just doing technique, you know, one single line, there may be a point where you just get stuck, you get blocked, and you can't go any further. If you're exploring all these other things continuously, then you don't get that block, you don't get that blockage. And so it allows all our pupils to move forward.
Do you think, when you say you don't get that block, do you think it's more that the teacher doesn't get that block because when they realise the student's having a challenge, they move in a different direction and they think, I'm going to focus on this aspect now and develop the person in a different way?
Exactly right, and it gives the teacher the imagination and the potential strategies to do that. Because some teachers, I'm just talking about some, but some teachers, they just have this kind of single-minded approach. It's mostly technique, and they also have quite a set sort of a route that they take that goes to wherever they feel is the right place to go. And if their pupil gets stuck, you know, can't move any further, then they're stuck as well, because that's their route. And so where does it go? You know, it doesn't go anywhere. That probably that people will give up, or you're not very good, or they're thinking I'm not very good. Whereas for the teacher who's thinking in this way, there's all sorts of directions in which they can move, and maybe one of those directions will allow that blockage to free itself. Let me just give you one example. It's a small example really, but you know, say a pupil is learning a piece and it's got staccato in it, and the teacher thinks, well, and they can't do it, they can't do the staccato, and the teacher's thinking it's a technical thing, because that's what they think. They always think it's a technical thing. So they say, no, this is how you do staccato, and the pupil doesn't get it still. They've reached a block. You know, that's all the teacher is able to offer. But if the teacher thinks, well, maybe it's not a technical thing, let's explore some of these other areas. Maybe it's an oral thing. You know, what are you hearing in your head when you hear staccato? And maybe that pupil is not hearing the staccato in their head, and therefore they're not able to replicate it. So maybe they need to take a journey to oral and explore oral. And then maybe before going back to the piece, they then take another journey to improvisation, and they do a bit of work on improvising, you know, hearing that staccato in their head, trying to make that sound, not related to the piece they're trying to practice, but just improvising some notes or something. And so in that case, they've taken two new routes, and then maybe they then get back to the piece and the pupil finds they can do it. And that's just one example of a million examples whereby taking a slightly different route or a significantly different route, making connections with other areas of music, we find our way back onto the main track. And I think that is essential, that all teachers know that can be done and should be done to re-enable flow. Because sometimes if you reach a block and you can't think of any ways to get through it, then there aren't any ways to get through it. You know, you are blocked. And I'm saying, let's think of all these other areas, find other ways to move forward.
Yeah, thinking outside the box.
And there's always, exactly right. That's another way of looking at it. There's always a route, always.
Let's talk about a slightly different angle then, Paul, which I think comes out of your method, but I think it's really interesting and extremely important, is that when we want to learn an instrument, we want to play a piece of music, actually, what we really want is that sense of fulfillment and that sense of expression. And the word expression can mean all sorts of things, because if you're a Motown singer, your expression is different to if you're a Mozart clarinettist, but expression is at the core of us. How do you think we develop expression in the music? Because that must surely be the most important part of the holistic. And as you say, if we focus on technical, we kind of miss the bit that hits our soul, and it's our connection with the soul that's more important to us than anything in music. That's why we start learning.
Absolutely right. And that's a very interesting question, Robin. And it's also a very broad question, really. So let me just give you a few thoughts that are in my mind on that. With some learners, particularly some learners who are within the sort of the adolescent years, being expressive may be very difficult for them from a psychological point of view. They feel that they don't want to be expressive. It's an adolescent thing, really. And so I think we have to watch out for that in certain pupils. It's not that they don't want to, they can't. It's too much, you know, particularly if they are being quite adolescent and maybe being rather quiet, as adolescents are. And the one thing they don't really want to do is to be expressive when they play their music. You know, maybe even making a crescendo is too much for them. It's extraordinary. Right. Something as simple as that, they're not able to do that. So that's one thing. Another area about giving someone the ability to express all the expressive things is that we need to find sufficient brain space for them to do this. And if their brain space, if their thinking is bound up with, you know, the technique of the instrument maybe, or reading the music or getting the rhythm right, or any of those things, putting in the staccato, they may not have any brain space left available to begin to explore the expressive side of things. Now, I don't believe that you know, you kind of do one thing at a time. The whole point of this teaching, this learning, is that we're making these connections all the time. But if we're doing it at the right speed, as per that particular pupil, then we should allow for there being brain space where they can do the expressive side of things as well.
Yes.
And so, you know, the speed that we teach someone something, if it's related to that pupil's processing speed, then it's amazing how much we can teach. And if we do teach it carefully, you know, let's work at this phrase. Do you understand the rhythm? Do you understand the pitch? Obviously, you've got the technique to play it. Let's do that one phrase with a crescendo. Let's get louder through that phrase, leading to this note here, to be or not to be. Well, you know, that's that's why I want to say that. And so this phrase here has got a similar idea. It's leading to this note. Can you do that? And we do it in rather piecemeal, in a sense, to begin with anyway. Then we are allowing that pupil to do that. Yes, I can play that. I know exactly how I should do it. And I can put that expressive side of it in as well. And then they can do it.
I quite like what you said there, Paul, because you've talked about crescendo, but of course, expression isn't just crescendo. It's where you were saying about leading to a particular note, what the musical direction is perhaps that hierarchical thing, what you're talking about there. And then that can influence tone as well, can't it?
Absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, tone color and the way we play with tone is all bound up. I mean, there's a lot of ingredients bound up in this whole expressive thing. But we want our pupils to get that as well, and for them to do that. And it's interesting. It's not like, you know, you've got your performance now. Let's take it to the next level and put the expression in. You know, we don't want to do it like that. It wants to all be part and parcel of the same process. But I think it can only be that when our pupil has the confidence to feel, I can do this now. Now I can do it with expression as well. It does have that sort of confidence angle to it. And we need to check our pupil does have the confidence to be able to do that.
It's interesting that that you can just take one note and do so many different things with it. It's harder on a piano or organ because what happens to the note after you've immediately played it is down to the instrument, if you see what I mean. But in terms of singers or other instrumentalists, there's obviously the beginning of the note, the middle of the note, and the end of the note, and there's so much to think about it, and how one note could convey an emotion.
Absolutely right. And it's fun to do that kind of teaching, actually. You know, maybe we're starting a new piece, and so it's in G major and it starts with the note G. So we say, okay, well, let's play with that note G. And what's the character of the piece? Can you play that one note with the character of the piece? What's the opposite of the character of this piece? Can you play that note with the opposite character? Can you play that one note slowly? Can you play that one note fast? One note. I mean, these are kind of almost philosophical thoughts, because how
Yes.
can you play a single note slowly or fast? I don't know, but it's interesting to play around with in a lesson.
Have you ever explored this kind of simultaneous learning and expression with choirs?
But personally, I haven't, but I know people who have. I certainly do, and I know loads of people who use this manner, this approach to teaching with, for example, ensemble teaching or orchestral teaching, where they ensure. So there are three tenets, there are three principles behind simultaneous learning. The first is that we absolutely understand the ingredients of whatever piece or song that we are learning. So here is a piece, and these are the ingredients. It's this key, and it's got these rhythms, and this is the expression, and it's got these markings, and whatever. We know those ingredients. Number two is that we make connections. My map of the world, we are teaching through making connections within these ingredients. And number three is that each activity in a lesson is proactively set up. I have a kind of in my mind, and actually in a new book I've just finished, a continuum. And on one end of the continuum is the kind of most severe, what you might call reactive teaching. You play, and then I'll comment on it. I'll tell you where you went wrong. And on the other end of the spectrum is the most imaginative simultaneous learning, and it's a spectrum. And I think it's nice for teachers to feel they're on this spectrum, and sometimes they may want to do some of that reactive teaching. That's fine, but more of the time they're kind of moving towards the more imaginative simultaneous learning kind of teaching. And I think if we're thinking through those three areas, then everything is going to work. I've forgotten the original question there, actually.
I started with talking about choirs and simultaneous learning applied to choirs.
Right, yes. That's right. So what I found with some orchestral conductors is that before we attempt this piece, let's look at the ingredients. Let's get the ingredients sorted out first, and I can imagine that working equally well with choirs. Let's look at, look, it's got a sixth here, let's just make sure we understand the interval of sixth, we can sing that interval or whatever it happens to be.
Yes, because I think once you get to choirs, the idea of simultaneous learning is perhaps a little more challenging to deliver, but probably a lot less often delivered, because you've got a group of people there. Here's the piece we're learning, you sing your part, oh no, you sang a wrong note there, let's go over that. Becomes a lot more didactic in its approach at times, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I would never like to say to people, you sang a wrong note there. I'd want to. I mean, you can say it like that if you want to. I'm not saying don't say it. You say what you like. But it's much nicer to say, okay, let's explore that interval and see how we can understand it in such a way that you've learnt that interval, rather than you sang a wrong note. It's actually, this is what it should be, because that sort of reacting and correction sort of teaching is rather short term. It's short term teaching, really, because that pupil is probably likely to get that wrong again. Because it's just corrected it in a short term way. And I'd like to try to find a way of making that learning, that teaching and learning, more long term. Because I got that.
I think there's another side to your method and the teaching that I've seen you do, Paul. And I think the element of that is that you've got that note wrong is kind of also saying, I'm better than you. You did it wrong. I know more. This is the way it should be. And I think the result of a lot of what I've seen in your work is actually it's a journey together.
Yes.
And I think that teamwork element between the teacher and the student is more a guide, a coach, a mentor. Let's travel this together. Let's develop. Let's evolve, rather than I'm better than you. You got it wrong. Let's correct it. It should be this.
Absolutely. You're saying, I mean, that's beautifully put, if I may say, Robin. And that's exactly right. I mean, teaching is a journey together. We are going on this journey together, and I am your guide. You know, that a teacher is a guide. It's that I'm better than you, and you know, maybe I'll allow you a little bit of my brilliance.
Yes.
It's, you know, that sort of teaching, that sort of approach. Well, I mean, we've all experienced it, and it happens, but it's more likely to lead to that pupil probably giving up, and unless they're
Yes.
pretty resilient, they're probably eventually, many of them will give up, because you know the ultimate is, well, I'm not really very good. More, my teacher's brilliant, and I will never be able to get as good as my teacher. And that sort of teaching, it will happen. That's almost the outcome of that sort of teaching. Whereas if you're, as you so beautifully put it, said, we're going on a journey together and I shall be your guide, that's wonderful, because the pupil feels so much more comfortable, feels that the teacher is there to help them, to guide them forward, not just to tell them stuff, to instruct them. No, the word teach comes from an Old English word, and I use this a lot in some of my talks, an Old English word, tishan, and it doesn't mean to tell, it doesn't mean to instruct, it means to show. That the same word was the word for the index finger in a long time ago, because the index finger was where we say, oh, look at that, I'd like you to see that. And so it means to show or to point out. It's pointing out things, and I rather like that. That's kind of the root of the word, and so we show our pupils things, we guide them along, and I think that's a lovely way of thinking about the role of the teacher.
Well, Paul Harris, my journey in the years that I've known you has been a wonderful journey, and I think you have guided me and steered me in many ways, and I hope that you will continue to be my guide for many years to come, indirectly, in however our paths cross. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time today.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Robin, for asking me.